Welcome to the 25th reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. Park Farm, the last months. The spring of 1955 brought a deterioration in the quality of our well water, turning it a horrible brown. Mum told the Colonel it didn't look fit for consumption, but he assured her it had passed the test for safety. I refused to drink it. The whole family, David included, happily drank tea and milk, so it didn't bother them too much. Forbidden by the Mangles to get clear running water from the big house, I took to taking a glass bottle to school to get what I called Colchester water. My obsession of filling up the bottle with the precious water became a daily battle with some girls around the water fountain, as they claimed I took too long filling up my stupid bottle. Sometimes I left for the long journey home with hardly any. No point telling a teacher about the water shortage at home. Life on the farm and life outside the farm, two separate worlds, yet I was forced to survive in both. Other changes occurred on the farm, much more serious than the colour of the well water. Dad discovered that the Mangles planned to sell off the animals and switch to fruit farming. Unsettling for him because with the animals gone, his job would involve less work and therefore threaten to be less important. I experienced a change too in my body, the one that Daphne warned me about before she left. I would have been terrified at the sight of blood appearing on my knickers when I visited the outdoor lavatory one day, if not for her. I expected a huge amount of blood to gush from my body, so I crouched in the bushes, waiting for it to happen. When it didn't, I went into the bungalow and sneaked some rags from the rag basket. Mum hadn't told me anything about periods, so I kept quiet. She would only make a big announcement in front of everybody. The soiled rags were thrown away in the bushes when I went out to play, and it would have stayed my secret if I hadn't been caught out much later on at what she assumed was my first time. She made such a fuss of me then that guilt flushed over me for keeping such an intimate revelation from her for so long. Many times I had wanted to tell her, but imagined her hurt and disappointment at her only daughter hiding such an event from her, and I couldn't go through with it. She took me to her bedroom, handed me a sanitary belt and a supply of pads she called bunnies, so silly that she couldn't use the correct word, and I remained so strangely removed from the ritual of womanhood she described, much too embarrassed to thank her. Spring heralded the season of war against all animals, not only the disappearance of our farm animals, but the spread of a horrible disease attacking wild rabbits. They were systematically being decimated by myxomatosis, a virus brought into the United Kingdom illegally from France in 1953. Some farmers welcomed the disease and deliberately moved diseased rabbits around so the virus would spread more easily. The government did nothing to prevent this, and so roughly 95% of rabbits had already died. Often, as we all walked along Cherry Tree Lane, sick rabbits would make their clumsy way out from the bushes right into our path. Blinded by the bumps inflicted around their eyes and slowed in movement by other swellings on their bodies, they made a sorry sight. Dad couldn't bear to see these animals suffer, so he carried a stick with him to put them out of their misery. He'd order us to walk on ahead while he lingered behind, not wishing us to see what he planned to do. I'd hear the thud, a shock wave through my body, and it sickened me. He told us that if he didn't kill them, they'd die a slow, painful death. I knew he didn't kill the rabbits in anger, but all the same, his anger always simmered below the surface. When he loses it with me and chases me around the bungalow, will there come a time when he'll decide it's time for me to die? There became precious little to do on the farm, other than inventive games of make-believe, which I was a little tired of. The farm seemed dead without the animals. You can't talk to fruit trees. Boredom settled on me and I was miserable, until something happened to perk me up. Dad announced that the Mangles were putting on a garden fete, inviting farmers and business people from the surrounding area. Most of the Mangles' friends were expected to attend. Much had to be done in preparation for this momentous day. Mrs. Mangles gave David and me something important to do. She deposited us in the large entrance hall, a place normally off limits unless Mum happened to be cleaning it, to carefully wrap the prizes destined for the sawdust-filled barrel. She sat on a chair and carefully scrutinized us as we buried each prize in the sawdust. Whoever won a race would reach into the barrel and rummage around for a prize. We were in charge of special inside information. When our turn came, we would know which prize to grab. Those precious prizes consumed my thoughts for days. On the day itself, I woke with such an air of expectation I could barely contain my excitement at the thought of all the people about to descend on what I considered to be my farm, my territory, and none of the visitors would be able to claim that. They were simply coming for the day, to run some races, have a pony ride or two. Some ponies were specially brought in for the event, look around, and then leave. I waited at the bottom gate to watch the steady stream of people make their way through the open top gate in cars, on bicycles, or strolling purposefully down the drive. As I opened the gate to let them in into my world for the day, I wanted to announce to each one, "Look at all this. It belongs to my family and to me. I live here, and I know every nook and cranny of this place." I fooled myself with my fancy notions. Our family owned none of it. We were instead owned by the Mangles. I was the child of the hired hands, the servants, as it were. The lowest of the low, as my mother called the poorest people in society. Nevertheless, the day gave me a high on a level I hadn't experienced in quite a while. A ride on a pony, first in the sack race. Didn't find a fantastic prize in the barrel, only one of the cheaper ones, but it didn't matter. Every part of the day held a thrill for me as I followed the visitors all over the farm, eager to answer all their questions. I entertained the world. By late afternoon, the visitors all trailed off home, and come evening, the farm became strangely quiet and lonely again. It settled into its pastoral solitude, and while it may have been comfortable with that, I was not. My dad talked of looking for another job. Maybe he missed the animals too, or perhaps my mother's health weighed on his mind. She needed an operation. I didn't know what for, but she went on and on about how she didn't trust doctors and hospitals, never had. A mystery, considering she used to be a nurse. Then the Mangles announced they were selling up and leaving. The fete must have been a going-away party. Perhaps Dad already knew, for he had already accepted a job in town. Caretaker of W.O. Peak Limited, the clothing factory in Stockwell Street, the factory whose workers waved at me from the windows in my early childhood. I could hardly believe we were going to move back into the very same house we left almost 4 years ago. At last, a move that had no sadness, fears, or uncertainty connected with it. On moving day, I couldn't find Oscar, the friendly little farm cat who adopted us. as his family. David and I loved him so much. He slept in a little box inside the bungalow. He let us dress him up in doll clothes and treat him like a baby. I told Dad we couldn't leave until he showed up. He would, I told him, if we waited. It doesn't matter, as he's not coming with us anyway, he said. And despite my protests, I had to climb into the back of the removal van and repeat in reverse the memorable journey of 2 years ago down Beerchurch Hall Road through the tree branch tunnel of noise. I watched the farm slowly disappear from view, knowing our little Oscar was out there somewhere in the fields, unaware that when he came to the bungalow, he would find it strangely quiet, the door closed, and his family gone. "Who'll feed him?" I tearfully asked Dad. "He's a farm cat. He'll survive. Don't worry," he replied. I tried not to, but... Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.